Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Off-Farm Income Podcast. Hey, this is our YouTube channel, and it is great to have you here with us today. Today, we get to interview Eric Bream from My Job Depends on Ag. Now, if you are not already familiar with My Job Depends on Ag, you definitely need to get on Facebook and check it out, or look them up on Google. Check out their website. What an incredible story of agriculture and of people involved in agriculture networking together. Never in my time have I seen a stronger response to a movement, to an idea in agriculture or in farming than I have seen through Facebook on My Job Depends on Ag, leading up to a television show that is regional this season, but there's a high likelihood it'll be nationwide next year. Really interesting stuff. Really looking forward to profiling Eric for you today, and we are going to start that right now. Eric, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Matt.
Hey, you bet. How's the San Joaquin Valley of California today?
It's 85 degrees. It's a beautiful day in the valley.
All right. That's my old stomping grounds. I grew up just north of Oakdale, California, so a little bit north of you, I believe.
Yeah, I'm down further south in the south part of Tulare County.
Oh, okay. Very good. Well, hey, I'm thrilled that you're coming on. I've been able to speak with somebody from My Job Depends on Ag before, but there's been so much going on with your organization. I thought it was time that we better talk to you again. So I really am happy to be able to speak with you. And I wonder if we could start out by just kind of introducing you to my audience, for those of my audience who are not already familiar with you. Tell us about yourself and what you do.
I'm a third-generation citrus farmer in Tulare County. That wasn't the plan. I grew up on the ranch and there until my late teens, early 20s. And my dad always kind of tried to talk me out of staying in farming, and I really didn't like it. And so I went out and did some other things for a lot of years, and then my family had planned on selling all of our property, but for tax reasons we were waiting until 2016. And in 2014 my dad had a stroke and passed away very suddenly. And it just made me kind of reassess my family's history in agriculture, my own take on it, and just some of it just struck me in a different way. And I walked out of my job and haven't looked back since. That's been about 5.5 years ago.
Wow. What was the direction that you were going to take before your father passed away?
I worked for the Department of Corrections here in California for about 16 years, and before that I worked for the county probation department. So I did that for a lot of years, and my wife and I were actually planning on retiring out. You know, in government jobs you kind of get to retire earlier than most folks. And we were going to leave California, which is pretty common amongst a lot of our friends. You know, we've got a lot of I know a lot of people in a lot of other states these days. And so, like I said, you know, it just really made me just take a second look at where we were, how we fit into things, and where I wanted to take things. And like I said, I haven't looked back since.
Yeah, I'm one of those people you're talking about. I've got 15 years in law enforcement, but I left it to be in agriculture full time, and started my law enforcement career there in the San Joaquin Valley, up in Tracy and then around Modesto. So you and I have stories that are kind of similar, not exactly the same, but kind of similar.
Yeah.
Okay, so then when that happened, when your father passed away, what do you think it was that kind of flicked that switch for you to make you go, wow, I'm abandoning this whole plan, and now we're staying and we're continuing in agriculture? What was it when you were assessing that family history and that legacy that made you come to that decision?
You know, part of it was looking my mom in the eyes and recognizing and realizing that, she couldn't do it by herself. And like I said, based on some tax situations and things, it wouldn't have been wise for anyone to sell right then.
Okay.
And, there was that, and a few weeks before my dad died, he and I went to dinner together, which was kind of rare for the two of us to, do something just by ourselves.
Okay.
Usually the whole family's around, and he opened up to me about a lot of things, and we had a conversation about the ranch and just what was going on, where his feelings were, and I had told him at the time, I said, look, I can take a leave of absence at work and come and help you.
Mm-hmm.
And normally in the past, he would have said no, and you go do your thing and I'll handle this. But he was open to it, which really surprised me.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were sort of planning a little bit on something along those lines. And then it was really just, kind of a God moment with me and my wife. Because we had a lot of plans in place, and I really threw a monkey wrench into it by doing what I did. But there was just something inside of me that said, you have to do this.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's important to follow that voice, whatever that voice is. I think it leads you in the right direction.
Yeah, like I said, I haven't looked back. It's been one of the best things I've ever done. For me personally, for my family and my extended family as well. So. Mm-hmm. I'm glad. I'm not glad of the circumstances,
right.
But I'm really glad the way it's worked out so far.
Right. Now here we are 5.5 years later. So what is the state of your farm today? Is it the same size as when you took it over? Are you growing new and in different crops, or what do things look like today?
So I've expanded on the custom farming side of things, and I've bought a smaller piece of property 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. So we're a little bit bigger than we were then, but I'm pretty dead set on not trying to grow too fast. Mm-hmm. We're in a decent position where we are now, and my goal, as I've gone through this, is I want to help smaller family farms survive this crazy world that we live in
Sure.
in agriculture, and the way I structure some of that for them is helpful for them to kind of ride this thing out. Mm-hmm. So we're not growing a lot, but we have gotten bigger.
And when you describe yourself as a citrus farm, are we talking oranges? Are we talking something else in the citrus realm?
We farm primarily oranges, navels, and Valanches. Mm-hmm. I do some work in lemons, and last year we just planted a block of pomelos, which is kind of a grapefruit kind of thing that's very popular in Asia. Okay. Certain times of the year. We farm a couple of other small blocks of different varieties, caracaras, and a couple other things, but primarily what we do is oranges.
Got it. And are you able to farm full time, or are you? And I know you mentioned custom farming, so it sounds like you've got your own business going as well. Yeah.
So it's all kind of lumped in together into one company. But yeah, it's what I do full time, and I have 2 employees as well. Okay. And so the stories that people don't hear, when I'm so excited about tonight's episode of our TV show, because the subject is farm labor. Okay. Labor in agriculture, and there's so many stories out there that people don't hear. And I'll give you an example. So my foreman this year is his 40th year working for my family. Okay. And that's not uncommon. There's a lot of that out there. Mm-hmm. And he is part of our family. I mean, it's just the way it is. And last year I had the opportunity to hire his son-in-law as well. And so, I just think it's one of the coolest things that we can go generationally through this together.
Yeah, that is very cool. And I've experienced the same thing. I've got family who farm grapes and citrus and some nut crops and things like that in Sanger, so not too far from you, and definitely a lot of the same faces around there every year after year as I was growing up as a kid, and the farming operation was actually a little bit bigger.
Right. Yeah. And one of the frustrations that you see when you pick up the LA Times, or, when you look on Facebook or wherever you're looking, that you hear, people hear the opposite of what we all see in reality on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
And that ultimately, I think that's really the frustration that got My Job Depends on Ag up off the ground, was really just a direct connection to people doing the jobs.
Mm-hmm. Well, so let's talk about that for a minute. Let's talk about My Job Depends on Ag, and then we'll get to American Grown. You mentioned the episode coming up tonight. How did My Job Depends on Ag get started, and what is that for folks who have not yet come to that page on Facebook?
My Job Depends on Ag was started by two of my good buddies, Eric Wilson and Steve Malanka. And, they were friends, well, still are friends, but during the last drought in California, there was a lot of misinformation that was in the media often. And there, and here in the Valley, there was a lot of frustration because our voice just almost didn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
It was drowned out by people saying that ag uses 80% of the water. We don't contribute enough to the economy. We're such a small part of the California economy that we really shouldn't exist, and things of that nature. And Steve came up with an idea. They had gone out to an alfalfa field, I think somewhere over in Los Banos or somewhere like that.
Mm-hmm.
And they took all the people and equipment out into this field that it would take to get just a bale of hay out of this thing.
Okay. And
you've got all of these people and all this stuff, and there's a photo of it that we still use when we go to events and stuff. And Steve thought he would try and find a visual that kind of represented that.
Mm-hmm.
And he came up with the idea of the state of California that says My Job Depends on Ag. And when Eric saw it, he thought, wow, we need to get this onto social media, and just kind of brainstormed it together with Steve, and they started the page, and it's just blown up from there. I mean, I think in the first week there was 10,000 members.
Wow. And
up to today, I think we're pushing between the two pages. I think we're pushing close to 100,000.
Wow. So that's how it got started. What's your involvement? How did you get involved and become one of the primary members of this page?
Well, I rolled into my mom's place one day, and she says, "Hey, have you seen these stickers?" And I said, "Yeah, I've seen them on trucks around, but I didn't really think too much about it." And at the time, I wasn't really into social media. I think I had a Facebook page my wife's set up for me a couple years before, but I never did anything with it. And she says, "Hey, you got to check this out." So I jump on there, and this was probably in the first month that it was in existence.
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of blown away because, for me especially, coming from my background, I went to work every day with a lot of people. I had a lot of interactions with people. I mean, I worked in a place where there's 1,400 employees.
Yeah.
And and then I went out to this, and I was really kind of lonely. I kind of had this feeling like I was just out on this raft by myself almost. And I looked at this and I thought, wow, I'm looking at all these other people's stories and what they're going through, and it just connected with me. And I think at the time I was probably a little naive, honestly, that I kind of thought that that agriculture in California, that everybody was on the same page.
Yeah.
And that's far from the truth. So I tried to keep a balanced viewpoint on a lot of things, because it's social media. There's a lot of bickering and back and forth,
mm-hmm.
Which kind of takes away from the goal of what we're really trying to do. But anyway, that caught Eric's attention, and he called me a few months later and said, "Hey, I need some help with this," because up to that point he had been doing it all by himself, and I think there was over 30,000 members at that point. And I mean, it was growing so fast that he just couldn't do it by himself anymore. And so I said, sure, whatever I can do to help. And, it's really turned into one of the best things that I've ever done, and I just kind of stumbled into it, honestly.
It's interesting. I read all of your guys' posts that come out, and obviously the page has morphed a little bit over time. But it's interesting to read your guys' posts because some of the things you're writing now are really introspective when it comes to agriculture and its role in your life, its role in the community and the world in general. And I wonder if being part of this page has made you look at ag even differently than when you took it over 5.5 years ago.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's expanded my views on so many things, because we tend to get caught in a rut where we think, that things are happening. The things that are happening right in front of us aren't happening in other places. Mm-hmm. And they're not happening to people in the dairy business or people, in the cattle business or in the hog business or people in the Midwest growing corn. And I think one of the biggest takeaways I've had thus far is really understanding that the challenges exist across the spectrum. And a lot of them are the same. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's really one of my big takeaways from it is I think I've learned to develop a lot more empathy than I had before, because we in California have a tendency to think that we've got it worse than everybody else.
Right.
And I think when you look at it objectively, that may be true in certain circumstances, mm-hmm. but in general, I see some of the stuff that's going on in Oregon and I just shake my head,
Yeah.
And so it's I've learned I think we've all learned a whole lot over the course of the last 5 years. Yeah. It's a different way of doing things now. And it's been interesting to talk about politics in agriculture, because that's kind of a no subject on a lot of levels. It's okay to talk about it behind closed doors or in the coffee shop or mm-hmm. whatever, but when it starts to become public, sometimes it's not taken so well. But it's such a big component of what we do that I think if we ignored it, it would be really, disingenuous of us at best.
Well, in particular in California, politics and agriculture, they seem to butt heads quite a bit. So, I think you're right. If you ignored that would be one huge elephant in the room.
Yeah, and it's, I've kind of developed a line of thinking with all of this that, I think a lot of the messaging that comes from agriculture, we tend to want to show people what I like to call the shiny side of ag. Mm-hmm. And we've got problems, we've got issues, and I don't think that we'll ever be able to solve any of them unless we confront them and we're honest with people. And, and that can cause some friction as well.
Right.
But our approach has been just brutal honesty, mm-hmm. because, people, consumers and everybody else, there's so much misinformation out there that people have to be able to trust what you're saying. Mm-hmm. And when you hedge and you only show people the pretty side of things, it's, because there is a lot of beauty in agriculture. Yeah. I mean, but it's not all happy cows and smiling farmers and all of that, which is what the image that we tend to want to put in front of people. And so, that's one of our goals, is to really show people all aspects of what's going on.
Now, it's interesting you brought up a moment ago about different states and things going on in other places around the country. When this all started, was it focused just on the San Joaquin Valley of California?
Yeah, there was some thought put into it beforehand that it was going to grow, mm-hmm. especially after the first few weeks when you see this thing exploding. Obviously, Eric hit on something there that attracted people. Yeah. And, and so we all kind of knew that it was going to get bigger. And, we've done some cool things, too. There's a page that got started in Australia. There's another one in Brazil.
Cool.
We've got a ton of members from Canada, and people in India and all over the world, and it's pretty cool.
And when you say there's another page that started, is it like My Job Depends on Ag Australia or something like that? What are we talking about there?
That's exactly what it is.
Okay.
Yeah, and it hasn't had the same kind of legs that as this one here in California. But long term, I think it's a good thing, and we've got all the decals for those countries and all 50 states, and all of the money that we make off of that, 100% of it goes straight into student scholarships, which is one of the coolest aspects of this. Because it's not a huge amount of money, but nobody's profiting off of this other than kids that want to go to school to study agriculture. So a portion of all of this is to give back to the industry. So that's a good thing.
Very cool. Now, I'm assuming that you're in all. You've got members or subscribers or however you want to describe folks that are on the page from all 50 states. Obviously, if you've got that many around the world, I'm sure all 50 states are covered.
Yeah.
So, do you have a region of the United States where you've had kind of an overwhelming response that was surprising to you guys? Like, wow, people in the Northeast or people in the Upper Plains or something like that.
We've got a few people from the Louisiana area that are pretty active on the page. It's hard because when you look at Facebook metrics, you can't really look too deep into it. So it's hard to say that. But I mean, we've got people in the timber industry and in the fishing industry, and those are a part of agriculture.
Yeah.
Just from all over the country, and it's such a cool thing to see what people are doing in other areas.
Yep.
We've got a guy on the page pretty active from India, and to watch what that guy has to go through in order to get he's a grape grower, and to watch what he has to do to get his grapes through. I mean, they've got floods all the time. They don't have near the infrastructure that we have out here. And he's got cobras in his vineyards all the time, and just wild stuff. And it kind of makes you step back. Like I was saying earlier, it kind of makes you step back and say, okay, we think we're just getting beat up, beat to a pulp out here in California, but everybody's got their own set of challenges that they're trying to work through. And this is just such a great outlet for people to be able to show anybody that wants to look at what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. So at what level? I know you talked about how when this started and it just kind of blew up just on that first day, that first week. When did you start, or when did the page My Job Depends on Ag, when did it start, pulling in attention from outside people like myself, like other media outlets, news stations, and things like that? At what level? What number?
Well, I mean, locally here in the Valley, that was very early on. And then there wasn't a whole lot. And early on, we did a lot of controversial things, said a lot of stuff that we probably shouldn't have said, but it wound up getting us some attention. Yeah. And probably, I think maybe a little over a year ago is really when it started to kick in, where a lot of us became more willing to do these kinds of interviews with people, and really start to have a bigger voice for the movement itself. And it's so far, I think, like I said, we've learned a lot, and I think things have toned down to a point where where we're not as controversial as we once were, and so people are more willing to talk to us at this point.
And there's a website now. I'm assuming this did not. I'm assuming the website came as a result of the success of the Facebook page. Do I have that in the correct order?
Well, yes and no. I mean, the website was set up from the beginning.
Okay.
And to the frustration of the gal that runs it, we haven't. The focus has always been on the Facebook page,
Okay.
and we probably haven't used the website the way we should, as much as we should.
Mm-hmm.
And I think probably, especially with the show when it kind of goes to the next level, I think we're going to have to change that a little bit and really focus a little more on our website.
Okay. All right. So you brought up the show, and I definitely want to talk about that. That's, I guess, the latest development in this saga of My Job Depends on Ag. But American Grown, tell us about the show and what it's about.
Well, it's really about My Job Depends on Ag. I met Jeff Aiello, who is the producer of the show, about 3 years ago. He was doing a documentary on California water that was called Tapped Out.
Okay.
And it's a for anybody who's listening, you can find it on Valley PBS website, and it's a great show that chronicles the history of California water. And Eric Wilson had called me and said, "Hey, this guy's doing this show. Do you want to be on it?" And I said, "No, because I don't know the guy." And when you start talking about water in California, somebody can twist your words pretty easy.
Sure.
And so I said no. I wound up getting a phone call a few weeks later from a friend of mine who said, "Hey, I'm going to film with this guy. Will you go with me? Because I'm not real sure what to say, what to do." I said, "Sure." So I go out and I meet Jeff,
Mm-hmm.
and I start talking to him. He slaps a microphone on me and he says, "You're not going anywhere until I film you." And I had already seen the first 2 hours of his documentary.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point I understood what he was trying to do, and I knew he was, on the right side of things.
Mm-hmm.
And so afterwards I sat with him and I started telling him a story about what one of the big issues that was going on at the time in ag, and he couldn't believe it. And I said, "I really want you to do a documentary about this." And so one of the groups that I work with, we started fundraising to make a documentary, and we were never able to get it off of the ground enough to raise enough money to do a standalone 1 hour documentary. But we raised some money, but we kind of just gave up on the idea. And then Jeff's wife at one point, about a year later, says, "Hey, I think we got to make a TV show." So Jeff calls me and he says, "Hey, do you still have enough money to fund the pilot for this thing?" I said, "Sure, let's do it."
Mm-hmm.
And the idea behind it was really to expand on the stories that people are telling on the Facebook page in more of a closed-end, controlled fashion that you really can't get on Facebook.
Okay.
And so we kind of started moving forward from there, and it took a while to get it off the ground. From that phone call until the first episode was almost 2 years.
Wow.
I learned a lot about the production business and the television business, and it was kind of there was times when it seemed touch and go, and it was kind of a heavy lift,
Mm-hmm.
but we got it there, and so far all of the feedback that we've gotten is positive. We're talking about some issues in some of these episodes that are a little touchy.
Mm-hmm.
But again, back to the point, it's really about just showing people the truth of the matter. And this is a great format for that. So it's been exciting to do. This week will be our 4th episode out of 10 for this season. And it's been great working with Jeff and Jill. They're professionals and they know exactly, because we don't control the content, they do.
Okay.
They'll see something that comes up on the page that's an issue or something interesting,
Mm-hmm.
and start floating around ideas for it. But those of us involved in My Job Depends on Ag, we don't control the content. It's really just more of a taking the stories and the issues that people are posting and turning that into a half-hour TV show.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So, folks, when they're posting stuff, do they have any idea they might get contacted about their story to go on this television show, or are they just taken by surprise each and every time?
No, it's not a gotcha kind of thing. It's really we've had a lot of people offer to help in whatever way, and I've seen Jeff and Jill on the page, when they're looking for someone specific to talk about an issue, they'll ask on the page and people will respond and say, yeah, I'll do that, or I know so and so over here. They were doing that for an episode on women in agriculture. They were specifically looking for a female that is the boss at a farm. And they were able to find people on the page. It's just a really cool way to have people connected.
And with it being aired on Valley PBS, does that mean that the show itself is focused strictly on California, or are there plans to expand into other states and into other, aspects of agriculture?
From the beginning, the idea was to expand the show onto PBS's nationwide platform. And there's certain things that you have to comply with when you make a show that in order to do that. And Jeff made sure that all of that was in order, and that we're reasonably confident that next spring it will be available across the country. And season 2 should include areas outside of California. I can't speak for Jeff and exactly what he's going to do. I just know the big picture aspect. That's really the goal, is to be able to, go across the country. And I'd love him to see him go to other countries, honestly. I spent some time in Australia last year, and it's like holding up a mirror to California as far as agriculture goes. And, again, back to my earlier point, you start to learn that you're not alone in all of this, that across the globe, across the nation, that everybody's dealing with a lot of the same challenges.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, what a story. So now on the show, are you involved day to day? Are you like a consultant or a producer or an advisor? How does that all work from your perspective now? We're not really involved, and that was important to PBS that that we didn't get we don't have the ability to control content. But we might, if I see something interesting or something's going on, I might kind of push it Jeff's way and say, hey, you might want to take a look at this, or for example. Recently, there was a problem with the olive industry here in California. Pretty big deal. And, so I kind of gave Jeff the right people to talk to because, it's like for me, I can talk about it articulately, but I'm not the guy to talk to about it. So, it's those contacts and connections that we can give him and allow, and it helps because he doesn't have to struggle so much to find the people, and it gives him a little more credibility because we know these people. And, if he calls someone or emails someone and says, hey, Eric Bream gave me your number, and I'd like to talk to you about, what this deal in the olive industry, that helps grease the wheels for him. But as far as us actually controlling any of the content, we just don't. That's between his company and Valley PBS. Okay. Very cool. Well, what all of you have done is incredible. Before we wrap it up, I'd love to ask you more about the scholarships that you mentioned. So who is eligible for those, who can apply, and they're going to support students who want to learn more about ag and devote their careers to ag. So how does that all work?
So we're not people that have a lot of time and the resources, and I'm not the guy who you would want to pick for your kid whether or not they got a scholarship, right?
Right.
So all the money goes to a nonprofit called the Central Valley Community Foundation, and from there it goes to the Center for Land-Based Learning, and then those scholarships move out from there.
Got it.
So, because like I said, if we had to do it, if we had to sift through we've got every one of us that's involved has our hands full. We're running businesses and trying to keep up with with a very active social media group.
Right.
And doing things like this, and so we just really kind of put that off on them, and they're happy to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a good thing for the community. So we're blessed.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's merchandise, there's ways for people to donate, ways for people to get involved. Where should they go if people want more information and they'd like to pick up some stickers or hoodies or hats or whatever?
That's a brand new website, and I think it's mjdoastore.com. But if you Google "My Job Depends on Ag," it'll come up. Or you can go to our other website, which is myjobdependsonag.com.
Okay.
Or you can jump on our Facebook group, and we also have our cause page, which isn't a group; it's just a like and follow page.
Mm-hmm.
And that's quite. We don't use that one as much, but that's for really a more toned down aspect of what we do. So, you'll see some different things out there. But if you want to be in the group, then just look us up on Facebook at My Job Depends on Ag and join the group.
Awesome.
And anybody that wants to join, it may take a little while to get you approved, especially since the show took off. We've got a backlog that is kind of scary, but we'll get through it.
Awesome. Well, Eric, thank you so much for taking some time today and sharing this with us. I really enjoy what you guys are doing. I've been following you for years now, and so it's great to be able to profile you on the show and share you with my listeners.
Great. Anytime, Matt. Thank you.
Well, thanks for joining us, everybody. Thanks to Eric Bream for coming on and talking all about My Job Depends on Ag as well as American Grown. Really excited to hear everything that is going on. We really appreciate you being here. We could not be doing this without you. And as always, enjoy your journey to the ultimate lifestyle business, agriculture.